Welcome everyone to our first class. It's a short one, but it's something that we need to establish before we begin the sacred study of the Holy Scriptures of the New Testament. So it's simply, what does the word canon mean? The canon of the New Testament. So canon, let's do a definition first. So literally, specifically, simply, it means rule, R-U-L-E, a straight stick that serves as a ruler. So a ruler is something that you use for measuring, to know if it's the correct measure, right? A rule also, number two, is something that is, we learn what are the rules, what is the proper way, what is the proper description, what is the proper telling of the stories, the truths of the New Testament. So it's a standard of directness, is many different ways to explain what it is. In a figurative sense, it means to a standard of correctness, so that making sure that it's correct. Every dot and every tittle, every part is absolutely correct. So in our definition, when it's applied, the word canon, when it's applied to Holy Scripture, the canon means a set of books recognized as inspired by God and intended for reading by believers. All right, inspired by God and intended for reading by believers. So the canon of the New Testament, recognized by the church in the 4th century, that's the 300s, includes 27 books. So simple, let's add them up. 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts of the Apostles, right? The epistles of the apostles, let's see. James had 1, Peter had 2, John had 3, Jude had 1, Paul had 14, plus the revelation of John the Theologian. So the canonicity of these books, that's what they call it, is determined, and this is the question really, how do you determine the canonicity of these books? So it is determined, and this is one of our key points, by their undoubted apostolic origin. So the undoubted apostolic origin. So this is something that you should always, we should always remember. We should write down, it's apostolic, from the apostles. It came from the apostles. On the other hand, books that claim to be sacred, but their origin from the apostles wasn't recognized by the church, they're called apocryphal. So that's what they're called. They're not recognized. They're claimed to be sacred, but their origin from the apostles isn't recognized by the church. Apocryphal writings. There are many, dozens of them, but only some of them do not contain heresies. So important to remember. We don't want them to contain heresies, these apocryphal books. So some of them do not contain heresies and are even revered by the church. Let's think of a couple of them. The Shepherd by Hermas, the Didache, which is the teachings of the 12 apostles, and some others. Being part of the sacred tradition, they are part of the sacred tradition. For example, we know much about the life of the Virgin Mary. Why? How do we know this? From tradition, from the so-called Proto-Gospel of James. This is an example of their revered by the church, but they do not contain heresies. So, the Proto-Gospel of James, we know about the life of the Virgin Mary. So most of the New Testament books were written between the 40s to the 60s of the first century. That's just after Jesus was on the cross and the resurrection. That was in the mid-30s. So this is written between the 40s and the 60s of the very first century. These writings have come down to us. It's interesting. This is a fact that shows us the, what would you call it, the validity, the reliability. Thousands, you see, thousands of these manuscripts have come down to us, and the oldest of which date back to the beginning of the 2nd century. So that is the beginning of the 100s, the beginning of the 2nd century. So thousands of manuscripts testify as to the historical existence of the scriptural writings. In addition, the books of the New Testament are mentioned and quoted by many, many authoritative church writers of antiquity in such a way that using only their quotations, we can sum up the fullness of Scripture, the reliability of Scripture. If you take books from that period of time that have a reliability factor, many of the books that you would well know by Plato or Aristotle, they have a certain rating, but because of those external books that refer to them, but the Holy Scriptures, their rating surpasses by many, 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 showing to us the reliable text for these reasons, these thousands of manuscripts, these authoritative church writers of antiquity, for these reasons that have been mentioned here in just the last couple minutes. The New Testament is the most reliable text of the ancient era. Isn't that exciting? The most reliable text of the ancient era. So that concludes our lesson for the first one. We'll give snapshots of what's coming up. And just to know that we aren't interested so much in retelling the stories of the Gospels or the New Testament, but by sharing with you points and descriptions and important truths that accompany, that may not be, you won't get from just reading. It's our responsibility to read the stories of the Gospels and the New Testament, but here our goal is to give some additional perspective and truth as to what the Gospels and the stories are trying to convey to us. So thank you for being with us, and we'll see you in the next lesson. Okay? God bless. Bye-bye.